And let's walk through some of the positioning and what you would recommend in a healthy person in doing this. And then later on we can get into what you might do if you have an injury.
First of all, before we even get into that, I love how this is set up, because when we get into pushing motion and pedaling, the placement of the Excy behind this chair creates a super stable base such that you can pedal really easily. So it's really, this is great.
Okay. All right. Well, let's go ahead and let's say we can shrink it based on your height here and where you would like my leg and the extent of, my feet on the pedals and the bend in my knee.
Right. So if we're setting this up for normal use, what we typically look for in positioning a foot on the pedal, first of all, for normal bicycling, is we take our first metatarsal head, which is the bump of the big toe right there, and we want it slightly forward of the pedal spindle. The pedal spindle is the thing that attaches here to the crank off of the pedal. So again, the first metatarsal head, ideally we want just forward of that pedal spindle.
Okay.
And so that's maybe home base, but there's reasons why we might move the foot a little farther forward or a little farther back.
Okay.
But that's a great starting position.
Great. How about my knees?
Well, when we go to the knee, there's a healthy range for the knee. So if we have too short of a position, we end up bending the knee too much, and that creates one of the most common ailments in cycling is anterior knee pain. Okay. And so there's sort of there is an optimum range of motion of what you're looking for with regards to your pedaling. We can find this by either measuring a knee angle at the greatest point of extension. So if I put my leg out here, that's our greatest point of extension. If we measure this angle, and I realize that people won't necessarily be able to measure on their own, but we typically look for a knee angle anywhere from about 32 degrees from full extension to about 40 degrees from full extension.
Okay.
But if we don't have our little measuring device or have someone do that for us, the other simple thing you can do is you can put your heel on the pedal.
Okay.
So you'd put your heel on the pedal on both of them, and then you could try to pedal backwards. Now in doing so, what you would find is we'd want this length set up such that we could pedal backwards and get the leg to almost full extension, of what you're doing right now, by the way. And that would define roughly our reach in our pedaling.
Okay.
So you're really quite close there. Yeah. So at this point we'd verify, it's great. It seems to be reasonable. So we'd put our first metatarsal head again, just forward of that pedal spindle, and then you could just start to pedal.
Okay.
So this defines somewhat of a safe range for your pedaling, which is really, we'd say maybe step one to a healthy use of the Excy.
Now, how about in reverse, in the same positioning, going back to here, or,
Oh, if you're pedaling backwards? Well, the problem, if we've established the reach on the heel to pedal method and we're going to do some backward pedaling, the problem is we're going to pop that knee into almost hyperextension, which will be not so great.
So putting them back in the same.
Yeah, you'd want that foot back in the same position for backward pedaling as well as forward pedaling.
Okay.
Yeah.
And I like socks. I like to use my socks and really feel the pedal with my feet, and everybody has a different preference. What's your take on socks versus shoes, maybe putting your cycling shoes on?
So for a person who maybe is just freshly rehabilitating from, say, a lower extremity surgical procedure, quite frankly, the easiest thing to do, they're not going to be out running around in their boots, and so they can just essentially get out of bed and just jump right on. So it could be barefoot, it could be sock foot. It sometimes depends on the sensitivity of the foot.
Okay.
So if I have a really sensitive foot, I probably won't tolerate barefoot or sock foot. So that's where I might use a shoe. Now, with regards to what your preferences are with using a socked foot, that makes you work harder through the foot. And so you're going to find that if, the big exercise is the bicycling motion, but your secondary gain by using just the sock foot is that your foot's going to have to work harder.
Okay.
Also, if your foot's a little sensitive, maybe at some point we do want to just use a socked foot for pedaling, because that's going to help with the sensitivity or decreasing the sensitivity. Let's have you take a foot off the pedal. When you look at these pedals that come with the Excy, there's some very soft bumps on here that help create some form of traction. And so they're not sharp. So there's some bicycle pedals, like you can get some aftermarket BMX mountain bike style pedals that have a lot more grip to them. You definitely wouldn't want to have a socked or barefoot.
Yeah.
You'd want to use your shoe then. But you know, for, we'd say maybe the advanced person who's looking for a cycling stimulus, that's maybe what they'd want with use of a shoe.
Okay.
So again, it's a varied answer,
Okay.
but there's, you know, the nice thing about this is there's so many different ways to use it. So kind of sky's the limit here.